Honeymoon Hotspot workers. What are your best and worst stories regarding newlyweds? A couple came into my camera shop during the old days of film and explained that they were honeymooning and were concerned that their roll of pictures of the honeymoon just kept going for some reason, like way past the 36 frames. When I told them there was no film in the camera, the honeymoon ended right there for the poor bastard husband whose job it was to load the camera, if looks could heal. On the last day of my honeymoon, my husband and I stopped at a beach to relax for a while. I don't normally let him near my electronics because he has a major tendency to be kinda clumsy, but he wanted to take a few pictures, so I let him use my camera with like 400 pictures from the trip. He took a photo he didn't like and went to delete it, but accidentally hit delete all. Then click yes when it asked him to confirm. I tried so hard to keep my cool because I could tell he felt so terrible. But I ended up crying and it was a huge mess. Luckily his brother is tech savvy, and he was somehow able to recover them. Well, some of them. We probably lost about 150 pictures. But at least I have the majority of them now. I work at a hotel restaurant. One day we hosted a wedding reception for a young couple who paid for an open bar. The party was a blast. People got wasted and had tons of fun. Around 2 a.m. the bride and groom and their closest friends finally left the restaurant to go back to their room. Apparently they decided to all hang out in a room for a while and continue the party. From what I heard, at some point the maid of honor called the bride a les, and the groom socked said maid in the face. She ran, screaming, to the front desk and called the police. The groom was arrested and taken to jail on his wedding night for assaulting the maid of honor. 1 year later the couple returned to the restaurant for their anniversary. They were super cool and seemed really happy. My cousin and his wife got married about 5 years ago, but they had been in a relationship for over 10 years before they got married. So she had been a part of the family for a long time, and everyone already considered her family long before they got married. Anyway, me and Lisa, my cousin's wife, had an inside joke that was years old by the time they got married. And part of it involved saying, "Duck you. No, duck you," to one another. Anyway, everyone at their wedding reception got plastered, including me and Lisa. And she comes up to me and does the inside joke, which ends with me saying to her, "No, duck you." We both start laughing for a total of about 2 seconds, until one of the groomsmen who didn't know me or know this was an inside joke nailed me square in the jaw, grabbed me by my tie and started screaming at me to apologize to the bride. He was quickly grabbed by about 10 people and kicked out of the wedding while I was brought inside to clean my face up because a ring had cut my face and I was bleeding pretty badly. Anyway, fights happen for weird reasons at weddings. Been on the receiving end of one myself. I used to work at a Hilton hotel near Disney, and there was a newlywed couple that had come down from their room and said they had just gotten married and they were looking for the nearest topless bar. I'm confused as to how forward they were and why they would want to spend their wedding night at a topless bar. So I directed them down a sleazy part of town and told them there were plenty down a specific road. Later, I was so shocked I told my coworker what had just happened and what they were looking for. He then called me an idiot and said, "They probably asked for a tapas bar." Well, sheet. That was the first time I had heard of said place, and never knew they existed or were called that. I'm the evening maintenance at a resort, and we get a call that a room has a light bulb out. Cool, something to do. So I hop on my one-speed golf cart and make way to the room with light bulb in hand. I arrive to said room and I knock on the door and announce, "Maintenance!" I hear a man say, "Come in." So I grab my key card, swipe myself in. Lo and behold, the hairiest Russian dude and his smoking hot wife jump from the bed, buttoning up their drawers wide-eyed as deer in the headlights. I 180 degrees, tractor beamed my eyeballs to the floor, apologized and waited outside of the door. Harry the Russian opens the door, and instead of going in to change the bulb I said, "Here you go." Just handed it to him, and hightailed it out of there. After long thought, I came to the conclusion he had said coming, but I misheard behind all of his chest hair and his accent. I live in Las Vegas, and I used to work in one of the major casinos on the Strip. One night in one of our clubs during a wedding reception, one of my employees let me know that he had heard multiple people in a bathroom stall. The stalls had full doors so you couldn't see feet, but you could definitely hear some debauchery going on. I called security and they asked the people to open the door. So out comes a groomsman, followed by the bride, followed by the best man, followed by the groom, all half naked. They proceed to go right back to the reception like nothing ever happened. I was in Mexico with my mother and sister. As we were walking down an outdoor path in the resort, we saw a young girl crying and her boyfriend walking behind her frantic. They were both covered in cuts and bruises, surrounded by security and medical, and of course on their honeymoon. I asked one of the staff what happened. The couple was having sex on their balcony and fell off, apparently not too high off the ground, but height enough to be beaten and shook up. TLDR, don't have sex on a balcony. Not quite honeymoon related, but I work in a high-end hotel chain, and during the reception, I delivered cake, presents, champagne and robes to the bridal suite. Having my own key and not expecting anyone in the room, I let myself in to find the mother of the groom and a groomsman having a little bit of fun on their own. Fair to say I walked out quite quickly. I live on Maui and worked for a while at Enterprise Car Rental. Once I already had a new job lined up, I could get away with anything. This newlywed couple had an economy car reservation and wanted to upgrade to a Mustang convertible. It was supposed to be an extra $100 per day, which the guy could obviously not afford based on the look on his face when I told him. But I gave it to them anyway for free because there was sand in the front seat that I didn't feel like vacuuming. They jumped up and down and hugged me and said I made their honeymoon. The feels. I worked overnight at a hotel, which pretty much involved me sitting at a desk watching twerk videos until the phone rang. A guy called to complain about room 114 because the guy was watching porn on full volume. This was the usual routine for me. Every Saturday this guy would rent the same damn room and I'd get a noise complaint that he was watching porn too loud. I would go and bang on the door. No one would answer. And he'd settle down for a bit, then start back up. Then the phone would ring again with another complaint, and I'd have to comp the room for his unfortunate neighbor. Well, tonight I was fed up. I kept banging and screamed, "I know you're in there. This is getting old. Open up." After a few minutes, the door opened up to reveal a camera on a tripod, a naked woman in bed, and him, naked from the waist down with a camera in hand. He told me he shoots porn here and that's what the noise was. He asked me if I ever wanted to duck one of his girls. I must have turned temporarily retarded, because that's the only logical reason I said, "No thanks." He offered me a $50 tip to continue to allow him to film at our facility, because the last place kicked him out. For the rest of my time there, he got complimentary upgrades to our suites every Saturday. TLDR, I'm the reason for those editing cuts in porn films. I work at a high-end couples retreat which honeymooners often come to. I guess you would say it's a more on the best side of the stories, as every time this certain couple would come to breakfast/dinner, the quite attractive girl would be always wearing see-through tops with no bra. And when I took food to their rooms on multiple occasions, the woman would open the door in her underwear, or be naked under the covers in her bed. I've had a few drunken honeymooners invite me back to their room for drinks, but I've never taken them up on the offer. I like to keep my job, haha. Got married in Hawaii, staying at a swanky resort. Late one afternoon, my wife was getting out of the shower, and I had boxers on lying in bed after a long day at the beach, when out of nowhere I hear the front door opening up. I thought it was my wife, and she thought it was me, But in walks a couple with luggage and key card in their hand asking what we are doing in their room. Needless to say, we were upgraded to an oceanfront suite for the rest of our stay due to the screw-up at the front desk. We were also comped meals for the rest of our stay. And one half our bill was also comped. TL and DR, strange couple walks into my hotel room. Hotel pays dearly for it lol. Edit spelling. I was serving at a wedding a few years ago that probably fits in the most embarrassing category. It was the part of the reception where everyone gives a speech or a quick toast. When we weren't serving, we were expected to line up a specific way, and am standing there facing the bridal party from across the room. The bride's mother gets up and does this very touching speech on how she wished grandma had been able to see it, and what a beautiful bride her daughter was. Then she pulls out this box and says she has something from grandma. She pulls out this old doll. The kind with the huge fluffy dress that people use to set on the bed as decoration. She hands it up to the bride, who starts telling her guests how she's always loved this doll since she was a kid, and she wondered what happened to it after grandma died. So the photographer comes up to get a picture of her with the doll, and right as she poses, this little silver ball on a cord falls out of the bottom of the doll. At first I didn't know what it was, but the bride picked it up to look and immediately freaked and dropped it, which set the crowd off. One of my coworkers had to explain to me it was a vibrating egg, 6 toy, and it was probably grandma's. To this day I wonder what kind of photos, if any, the photographer caught at that moment. I'm a wedding photographer and a groom. Recently returned from honeymoon, told me the story of how he got his $15,000 honeymoon free of charge. He and his brand new lady wife had just checked into the honeymoon suite of a palatial island paradise after a long flight from London. Having showered after their journey, they retired to the bed to celebrate their new union. Once the throes of passion had subsided, the groom tells me he saw the drapes by the window move a little and, jumping up, pulled them aside to see a bellhop concealed there and, you guessed it, having a bit of a twang on the 1-string bass. Naturally they complained, and the manager, seeking to minimize the damage, fired the employee on the spot and basically traded the full stay in return for them taking the incident no further. Okay, so I work at a high-end all-inclusive hotel in SoCal. Honeymooners often come here, and for some reason sheet always seems to get really weird. Possibly because I know one of my coworkers sells Molly. So one night at like 3 a.m. we get a request for room service, and they want mustard, ketchup and a bun. So to get this straight, they did not ask for a hot dog. Being that we are all about customer service, I go into the kitchen and get all of the items and bring it up to the room. I knock once, no answer. Twice, no answer. Then finally after the third knock I get an answer. I give them their mustard, ketchup and bun on the platter, and the ducking dude rips off the top of it, grabs the bun, whips out his big dig and sticks it right in it. The new wife grabs the ketchup and mustard and dumps it all over it. They both start hysterically laughing and close the door. I was at a loss of words for hours, so I guess they got me pretty good. When I was about 10, my family was in NYC for vacation, and we were walking down the sidewalk when we saw a man in a tux and a woman in a wedding dress arguing. When we stopped at the crosswalk, I overheard their argument, and the woman took off her ring and yelled at the guy, "Well, why don't I just give that kid my ring if it doesn't mean shit to you?" and pointed at me. The man quickly tried to hush her, but it didn't work as she started to yell louder. We got the hell out of there. You should have accepted the ring. You could have pawned it off for a lot of money for a 10-year-old. I worked as a guest service agent / bellman at a nice hotel chain. One weekend during a wedding in one of our banquet rooms, I was befriended by a groomsman. Chubby little guy. Very nice nonetheless. Participated in a few staged wedding shots around the hotel, and whatnot. After getting to know them a little bit, I found the entire group of bridesmaids and groomsmen were very close. The chubby little guy was particularly close to the bride. I thought nothing of it. As their reception began later in the evening, I'm paged by the front desk to visit a room that had a call for distress, These pages are normal on a wild Saturday night. I grab security and go up to the said room. The groomsman that I had befriended earlier had tried to commit suicide. He had ingested many pills and was laying in the tub half filled with water. The call for distress actually came from his mother, who was living in the same city, and she was the first person he called informing he was going to end it. He had apparently backed out halfway. Long story short, we wheel him out to the ambulance, and the bride and groom are there waiting for us in the lobby. As he is leaving with the crew, he tells the bride he is sorry and didn't want to suicide on the same day they were getting married, but he loved her too much to go on. They had a short exchange and then he was whisked away. The bride was furious. Apparently he handed her a letter of reasons why they were supposed to be together as well. All the meanwhile the groom was just completely dumbfounded. He had no clue. One of the most ridiculous and awkward things I've seen at a wedding. Oh, the groomsman was fine. Made a full recovery. Not sure if they're still hanging out though. I used to be a bouncer at a nightclub that was part A major hotel in San Francisco. People would get married and have their reception in the hotel and then head to the club after. One night a couple 2 hours fresh from the altar and their party was in the club. They are sloshed. But the bride is beyond drunk and causing problems, stumbling into people, being too loud and trying to cross the VIP rope that I'm guarding. Well, she gets across the rope, and while I'm trying to persuade to go back to the other side, she starts grinding on me and saying, "You think you can handle me?" Her husband is about 3 feet away with his jaw on the floor. I asked him to control his wife and he snapped out of his shock. He grabbed her wrist and dragged her out of the club, swearing up a storm. I still feel bad for the guy. Okay, time for a throwaway here. I work nights at the Anniversary Inn in Salt Lake City, UT through college. To save you a search. It's an overpriced themed room in that Mormon newlyweds absolutely go batshit crazy for. Want to spend your wedding night in a pirate ship? We got you covered. Egyptian tombs? Yep. So there have been many a Mormon cherries popped while I was on shift. And a ton of really weird, funny, and sad stories. Funny 20 minutes after an obviously nervous newlywed couple checked in. The husband opened the door and yelled, "6is awesome!" He did this multiple times through the night. Made us laugh every time. Weird/creepy. We had a dad drive the newlywed couple to the inn, and then come in to help them check in. Their kids were clearly adults. So I thought this was weird. Once they were checked in, the dad gave them a mini lecture about the sanctity and spirituality of 6, and how what they were going to be doing that night and through their honeymoon would echo throughout the eternities. Super creepy. Sad. More than once we would have bride come running from their rooms in robes, sobbing and in a totally delirious state. They weren't ready for 6. And it was clearly a traumatic experience for them. I always felt really bad for them, because it would be really difficult for someone who has been told that 6 before marriage is evil to suddenly flip a switch and be expected to become a sexual being. I don't work at a Honeymoon Hotspot, but over winter break I went on a cruise. My cousins and I had met this couple on the cruise that were on their honeymoon. The husband was pretty chill, and the wife seemed really nice too. I think they were in their 20s. He was like 27, and she 24. I was drunk the whole cruise, so I may be wrong. Well, anyway, we had hung out with them just about every night, partying and drinking at the bar. Well, on the last night my oldest cousin went to bed early, and it was just I and my other cousin. It was around 2 in the morning and we were just chillin', being all drunk, enjoying food, when all of a sudden she comes stumbling into the restaurant and sat with us. She told us her husband went to bed, and she was lonely. We openly invited her to join us, and that's when she completely opened up. She was saying how horny she was, and how she had been keeping her eye on us. We thought she was joking, but then she turned and said that if she wasn't recently married she would have loved to have 6 with my cousin and I. We didn't know what to do, so we just walked her to her room and said goodnight to her. But I really have felt bad for her husband. She tried to apologize to us the next day, but my cousin got mad and told her she better get her act together. My cousin is 23, and I'm 20 BTW. Why get married if you are so willing to cheat? And talk that way behind your SO's back? I used to work events at a high-end place that did conferences and wedding receptions. To give you an idea, 1 to 2 year waiting list for wedding receptions and cheapest plans/menu was $300 a head. Plus being a hotel, the bride and groom stay in a room on the night propositioned so many times once every staff member got handed a photo, and it was do not allow to enter and to call security. It was the groom's mother. Apparently she hated the bride so much they put an AVO out on her. Took 3 police officers to get her into the police car. She bit one of the security staff. A bride so drunk they refused to allow her to sign the marriage certificate. The ceremony and reception went ahead, but the marriage officially happened next day when sober, the best and most memorable. The bride's father was paying for the reception. Groom asked for a few projectors to be set up so that he could play a movie and photo montage of their relationship. All's going well for 5 minutes until it hits a scene of the bride being pounded by 2 guys. Neither of which was the groom. One was the best man. Still to this day didn't know who the other guy was. During the video the groom had left via a cab. One other time the newlyweds had a cab call to the airport. We rang the room 30 minutes before the cab call as a courtesy. No answer. Manager goes and knocks and no reply. So he used the house key and there's the couple sleeping. Her in the wedding dress and him half in the suit, bother covered in vomit. So many have tried. We are honeymoon couple, please give us freebies. So the groom had already planned the video to be played as kind of a duck you to the bride and to embarrass her. Was this his planned exit strategy? What about the family who flew in? I'd be hissed if I bought a plane ticket for that to be pulled. I worked as a bartender at a pretty nice hotel. There was a big convention center attached to it with a lot of meeting rooms and a huge ballroom. I wasn't always aware what was going on at the convention center unless the hotel was full for a convention. It had been a fairly quiet night, and I didn't have anyone else sitting at the bar when a guy takes a seat and orders a beer. I got it for him, and he looked like he was kind of upset. Like something was really weighing on him. But I didn't want to pry. Some people don't always want to talk. This guy did. He said, "Aren't bartenders supposed to listen to your problems?" I say, "Sure, man. What do you want to talk about?" He begins to tell me that he had gotten married that day. They had had their reception next door and were staying the night in the hotel. I congratulate him. But I'm a bit confused as to why he's sitting here by himself on his wedding night. He tells me that he's in his 30s and his bride is 26. They had been together at least a year and a half. And she's a virgin. And he's not. I'm still confused as to why he's not consummating his new marriage. And he then tells me she was so nervous about their big night that she drank too much champagne and was in the room. Passed out after having gotten sick. I had to take a second to keep my composure and not chuckle at this poor guy's misfortune because he was obviously really upset about it. He explains that they're taking a flight out tomorrow and then getting on a cruise for their honeymoon. I did my best to try and reassure and be optimistic for him. I said something about nerves and I was sure that everything would work out for him on the cruise. He seemed a little better than he was when he first sat down. But he still looked frustrated. And who could blame him? He ordered another beer and went back to his room. I worked for a timeshare company as a supervisor over the phone, so I got all the escalated calls for those upset owners for whatever reason. And there was this couple that were spending their honeymoon in Aruba. They had it all planned out. They were going to take a nice walk along the beach under the moonlight and go back and just get freaky. Well, the time of year that they got married in happened to be a very humid time. So there's a lot of bugs out. I get the call from the bride. She's irate. Goes straight to the supervisor. She called in and blamed the timeshare company for the fact that she wasn't able to get naked in front of her new husband and have sex with him so that they could convenience their first child together. All because she happened to get some mosquito bites and she was embarrassed to get naked in front of him because of those bites. and since the beach was on the resort's property, it was the hotel's fault that she couldn't get naked and get pregnant. Edit. I'm leaving my typo because you guys made me smile. Smiley face. Bartended at this upscale lodge in Texas. Catered mostly to oil money and DFW area rich people. This lady came in. Probably 35-ish and decent looking with a nice body. Not quite a newlywed. But was married 6 months earlier. Then he cheated and she left him. About 4 martinis and she started spilling her guts. She said they had only had 6 maybe 10 times as a married couple and she misses the feel of a man, etc. Really putting it on thick that she needed some. So I playfully bartender flirted with her. Gave her a free drink. Paid good attention, etc. It got to be about midnight, bar closed at 12, and she asked if I could have a drink in her room with her when I got out. I said I couldn't do that, place had very strict rules and I was making decent money. After a few minutes I decided that the story might be worth it, and I told her that if she ordered room service I could deliver it in a few minutes. There was an end-of-night walk that had to be done that takes about 20 to 30 minutes. Which I figured I could just not do and I could help out this divorcee. She drunkenly nodded. And walked away. After about 15 minutes we got the order for strawberries to her room. I prepped them and got ready to go. Told manager I was going to do the night walk as well. Probably 15 minutes had gone by and I got to her door. It was slightly open. I knocked and walked in. There she was on the bed with another guy. Really fat hotel guest she must have picked up, going down on her, and she was no joke slapping his head yelling at him. Tongue duck me harder. While he was jerking himself off. Neither one noticed me at all. Set down the strawberries and walked out. It wasn't even remotely close to a honeymoon hotspot. And that was the sad part. I was 17 and working at a particularly shitty open-air motel on the night shift next to the nicest hotel in town, which wasn't saying much. A young couple came in practically in tears because the honeymoon suite they'd booked at the nicer hotel had rented out their room. And there wasn't anywhere else to stay. So they came to our motel, literally the only one in town that had a single room to rent. I felt terribly sorry for them and gave them the biggest discount I could. And let them into that last shitty little room. While they were getting their luggage. I remembered the suite right above the office that was usually rented out as an apartment. It wasn't any great shakes of an apartment. But it was the best we had. I didn't say anything to the couple right away. But went upstairs and did the best I could to scrub off the dust and spiders and rub a bleach rag over the linoleum. It took me about an hour and I was pretty proud of myself for getting the room ready as quick as I had. Given the decrepit condition it was generally left in, I threw the bleach rags and dirty linens in the laundry room. And went to go bring the couple to their fancy-ish new suite. I knocked, but no one came to the door. The new husband eventually asked what I needed and I told them about their room. I was sadly puzzled that they didn't want to seem to leave even just to check it out. And that they didn't even come to the door or turn on the lights. And that the new bride kept giggling. I made my way sadly back to the front office and concluded that they must have been really tired after such a long day. They sounded a lot happier than they did when they first came in though. So I figured my efforts weren't a total waste. They were definitely naked. Figured that out eventually, lol. This just happened a few days ago. I work at an upscale hotel chain on the coast in Florida. We get a lot of international guests. This couple wasn't on their honeymoon, but they were clearly married and on a special trip. They were both French and in their late 60s. I was working at the pool and the husband walks up to me looking for a towel. As he is walking up I see his wife pull out a bottle of wine and take a serious pull right out of the bottle. We have a no glass policy on the pool deck and not wanting to make a scene I grab a couple plastic cups and ask the husband if he could put their wine in the cups. He looks really outraged/offended when I asked. And said, "My wife doesn't drink alcohol." Well, I was pretty confused at this point, but I just said whatever it is. Could they put it in the cups? He takes the cups and walks back over to their chairs and after some heated conversation she storms out. giving me a witheringly dirty look as she leaves. I walk over to the guy apologizing. I didn't mean to upset you guys. Just doing my job. Etc. Turns out she was an alcoholic and had been pretending to be sober. The guy ended up crying as he sorta explained what the big deal was. It was pretty awkward. I think it was probably for the best that it came out into the open though. TLDR. Couple comes to my hotel from Europe. I accidentally revealed to the husband that the wife isn't sober. This probably doesn't count. I worked at a goddamn Dairy Queen. Hotspot? I think not. Anyway, this couple comes up to the counter, gushing and talking about how they just got married X days ago. They were clearly looking for someone to comp their first shared blizzard. What they did not realize was that I knew the girl involved. From a church-related thing. No less. The relationship was just distant enough so that she didn't recognize me without context. Clearly, they were dating or friends or something who decided to try to get free ice cream if she'd truly been engaged. I would have known. Anyway, I said in my sweetest voice. Sure. Name of girl. And congrats. Her face was priceless both at the time and later when I saw her among church people. Totally worth the money I had to eat for the blizzard. I worked at a camera/photo store near a tourist location when I was a student. Back when you took your film to get developed in an hour. My job was operating the big photo developing machine. A generally shitty, boring job. Most of the time it was fully automated. Get the film picker. Load the film. Press some buttons. Wait. Then the stack of photos comes out and I put it in an envelope for pickup. I had a supervisor/lab technician who monitored and calibrated the machine. So I was basically just a button-pressing minion. 90% of the time I don't even glance at the stack that comes out. Unless I need to check for issues with the prints, so I'd have to get the lab tech. I always see the top print. However, when I load it into the envelope, and often there'd be nudes, I'd occasionally have to flip through the photos anyway to prevent the photos sticking together so you'd see things here and there. Generally these are not attractive people. So I don't ever flip through them. I try not to take more than a glance if I could avoid it. Think unattractive. Flabby 40-somethings giving oral in terrible hotel lighting. And you know what I'm talking about. One time, I saw a bald guy giving another man fellatio as the top photo. I didn't think much of it except the guy performing had a very noticeable facial mark. I think it was a birthmark, or something. Again, I don't think much of it. Just drop it into the envelope. Put on the code sticker. Toss it into the box. I had forgotten about it by the time I left for lunch. A local sandwich joint. But then halfway through my lunch I see this guy walks in with the exact same birthmark on his face. And he was a priest. I tried not to stare. And he just buys a couple of cans of soda and walks out. The rest of my lunch all I could think of was that priest and the man's sausage in his mouth. I have nothing against homosexuality. It was just such a weird, intimate thing. When I went back, I asked the girl working at the cash register to see if a priest had picked up the photos. And she said he did. Of course I didn't tell anyone about it. Mostly because it's none of my goddamn business what a guy does on his vacation. I just hope he's happy. We rent out holiday homes on a weekly basis. That Saturday, the family that rented one of them didn't show up. Though they paid the €3,000 up front. No phone call or message to warn us of any delay. We tried calling them. No reply. In the end we concluded they must have had an accident on the way. 2 days and various attempts at contact from us later. I get a very embarrassed phone call. It turns out they were at their own wedding feast when they were supposed to arrive. In their home country 1,000 kilometers from there. They passed out at 5 a.m. Slept through the next day and only found our messages the following evening. The whole party just assumed someone else had told us they planned to arrive 2 days too late. I'm glad they turned out to be just wed rather than dead. But who the duck goes on honeymoon together with their parents and in-laws? My first marriage was back in 1987. We were both 20. Barely enough money for food and rent. You know the drill. We went on a honeymoon to a resort location nearby in a hotel. They gave us a room right next to the door leading to the indoor pool area. We checked into our room and I did the whole carry over the threshold thing, and we got busy pretty fast. Clothes piled on floor and us naked going at it, athletic sweaty six. Then I heard a noise and looked toward the door, and I see a couple of families staring into our open door that I forgot to even close. Ducking paparazzi, literally. I think someone actually did take a picture. But that was in the days of real film. And no internet, thankfully. My brother used to work at a big restaurant/resort that would often do weddings. One night they were hosting a large dinner party for all the guests after the wedding earlier that day. Of course, at that point everyone was pretty wasted, so the groom ended up getting into a fight with one of the bride's distant uncles. I kid you not. The uncle ended up biting off the groom's finger and swallowing it so he couldn't reattach it. Everyone was freaking out, and the groomsman ended up beating up the uncle until he puked back out the severed finger. I had just finished teaching newlyweds how to ballroom dance. I saw the gent had a hickey on his neck, so made a joke about it. Bad move. They had a fight and he stormed off, leaving her crumpled in a heap on the dance floor. I tried to console her the best I could, but it was ducked. She was way out of his league anyway. One other shitty note I remember was that the girl I had for my next lesson saw the whole thing. Everybody did. And was tapping her watch at me. Wow. I'm unreasonably mad at that watch tapping hunt. I could write a book about female ballroom dancing students. Most were lovely, but some Sheilas would boil your urine.